Our topic of discussion is the Indian Constitution. Everyone knows that India is the world's largest democracy, but it also has the world's longest written constitution. The Indian Constitution is not just a written document, it is the identity of an Indian citizen. Every year on January 26th, we all celebrate this identity as Republic Day. On this day in 1950, the Constitution of India was implemented across the country. But crafting the world's longest constitution was no easy task. It was the result of the hard work of those who conceived it and, over a total of 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days, put it into written form. The story behind the creation of the Indian Constitution holds a remarkable place in Indian history. Friends, on the occasion of the 74th Republic Day, in today's discussion, we will share with you the people, actions, and events involved in the making of the Indian Constitution. So, let's explore the story of the Indian Constitution from the pages of history. Moving toward the Constituent Assembly. Friends, the Constituent Assembly was formed in 1946. However, the process of developing democratic institutions and rights began long before the Constituent Assembly was formed. As early as 1858, the British rulers attempted to implement the elements of the Constitution in British India through various acts. The first of these acts was the Government of India Act 1858. Subsequently, the British introduced the Indian Councils Acts 1861, 1892, 1919, and the Government of India Act 1919. However, Indians had no role in these acts and were not included in them. In fact, all these acts introduced during the colonial period were geared solely towards colonial interests and had no intention of fulfilling India's core objectives. The first attempt by Indians to draft the Constitution was made in 1928 under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru. This draft is known as the Nehru Report or the Swaraj Constitution. The idea of forming a Constituent Assembly was first proposed by M. N. Roy in 1934. He was a founder of the communist movement in India and a proponent of radical democratism. Subsequently, in 1935, the Indian National Congress, INC, formally demanded the formation of a Constituent Assembly to draft India's constitution. Meanwhile, the British government introduced the Government of India Act 1935, which also disappointed Indians. However, this 1935 Act ultimately became a crucial source of the Indian Constitution. Subsequently, in 1938, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of the INC, declared that the Constitution of Independent India should be drafted by a Constituent Assembly elected on the basis of adult suffrage, without any external interference. Initially, colonial authorities opposed the demand for a constitution. But with the outbreak of World War II and the formation of a new government in Britain, circumstances changed, and the British government finally accepted this demand in 1940. Let's examine when and how the formation of a Constituent Assembly became possible. Formation and structure of a Constituent Assembly. On August 8, 1940, the then Viceroy of India, Lord Lingo, passed a resolution called the August Offer on behalf of the British Parliament. This resolution promised the British government that a Constituent Assembly would be established after the end of World War II to determine India's constitutional future. Consequently, in 1942, the British government sent the Cripps mission to India, led by its cabinet member, Sir Stafford Cripps. However, the mission's proposals were rejected by both the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. While the IEC was not in favor of the Dominion status offered by the British, the Muslim League demanded the formation of 2 autonomous states and 2 constituent assemblies. As a result, the Cripps mission failed. Subsequently, in 1946, the British government sent another delegation of cabinet members to India, known as the Cabinet Mission Plan. It included 3 cabinet members, Lord Patrick Lawrence, Sir Stafford Cripps, and Mr. A.V. Alexander. It was this cabinet mission that established the framework for the drafting of the Indian Constitution, which was designated the Constituent Assembly. According to this mission, all provinces and princely states would be allocated seats in the assembly in proportion to their respective populations. Approximately 1 seat was allocated for every 1 million people. The Constituent Assembly had a total of 389 seats, of which 296 were allocated for British India and the remaining 93 for the princely states. Elections for the Constituent Assembly were held in July and August 1946 for the 296 seats of the British government. The IEC won 208 of these seats. The Muslim League secured 73 seats, and the remaining 15 went to independent candidates. Although the members of the Constituent Assembly were not directly elected by the Indian people, despite being elected through restricted adult franchise, the Constituent Assembly included representatives from all sections of society: Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians, Christians, SCs and STs, backward classes, and a total of 15 women from all these sections. Thus, after many difficulties, the Constituent Assembly was finally formed. Friends, we all know that the Constitution of India is the result of a long process and deliberations, and the story of this deliberation begins with the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly. Let's examine the role of this Constituent Assembly in the making of the Indian Constitution. Role of the Constituent Assembly in the making of the Indian Constitution, 1946 to 1949. Friends, the historic day finally arrived, awaited by all nationalists who strive for the formation of the Constituent Assembly. December 9, 1946, was the day when all the delegates arrived at the Constitution Hall for the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly. All the important figures of India were present to shape a new constitution for India. However, the Muslim League boycotted the meeting completely. Furthermore, 2 key figures were absent, Mahatma Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Thus, only 211 members attended. Following a French tradition, the Assembly's oldest member, Dr. Sachidhan Sinha, was appointed the Assembly's temporary president. Later, on December 11, 1946, through an election process, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was appointed president of the Assembly, and H.C. Mukherjee was appointed vice president. Sir B.N. Rao was appointed the Assembly's constitutional advisor. While all the members were still adapting to the rules of the new Constituent Assembly, on December 13, 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru introduced a resolution in the Assembly that would become the foundation of our Constitution. This resolution is known as the Objectives Resolution. In fact, this Objectives Resolution was the vision for independent India that laid down the fundamentals and philosophy of the constitutional structure. This resolution addressed the aims and objectives of the Constitution. Explaining this to the House, Nehru stated, "Our India will be a fully sovereign republic. It will promulgate its own constitution. As the Indian Union, our country will include territories that were then under British rule. Princely states and territories that wish to join sovereign India will also be included. Indian citizens will be granted economic, political, and social opportunities, as well as equality before the law, along with freedom of thought, movement, organization, and religious belief. Furthermore, backward castes and tribes, minorities, and other groups in India will be adequately protected. Furthermore, Nehru declared that the ultimate source of all power and authority in sovereign India will be the people of India. This objective resolution was unanimously adopted by all members of the Assembly on January 22, 1947. This resolution later played a crucial role in the drafting of the Constitution. A modified version of this resolution is known as the preamble of the current Constitution. Shortly after the drafting of the Constitution began, the government in Britain changed. On February 20, 1947, the new Prime Minister of the new government, Clement Attlee, announced in the House of Commons of the British Parliament that the British would now transfer power to Indian politicians and leave India. Subsequently, on June 3, 1947, the new Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten, introduced a proposal known as the Mountbatten Plan. In this proposal, the British government accepted the partition of India and agreed to create two countries, India and Pakistan. Subsequently, in July 1947, the British Parliament passed the Independence of India Act 1947, and because of this act, the Constituent Assembly became a fully sovereign body. This meant that it was now completely free to draft any constitution it desired. Since India was also partitioned, the Assembly's membership was reduced from 389 to 299, as several provinces were no longer part of India. With this, the Constituent Assembly now became a legislative body. This meant that, in addition to drafting the Constitution, the Assembly now had another function, enacting general laws for the country. For this reason, the Constituent Assembly is known as India's first parliament. When it was drafting the Constitution, its president was Dr. Rajendra Prasad. When it was performing its legislative function, its president was G.V. Mavalankar. Both of these functions of the Assembly continued until November 26, 1949. To avoid mismanagement and balance the workload, the Constituent Assembly formed various committees. Of these, 8 were main committees. The most important of these committees was the Drafting Committee. This committee was tasked with drafting the Constitution of India, taking into account the proposals of various committees. Let's take a look at the role of this committee. The Drafting Committee of the Constituent Assembly. Friends, the Drafting Committee was formed on August 29, 1947. It consisted of 7 members of the Assembly. These included Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as chairman, Dr. K.M. Munshi, Syed Muhammad Sadullah, N. Madhavrao, N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Alady Krishnaswamy Iyer, and T.T. Krishnamachari. The committee prepared the first draft in less than 6 months and published it in February 1948. The people of India were given 8 months to discuss amendments to the draft. Taking into account the amendments, criticisms, and suggestions made by the people, the committee published the second draft of the Constitution in October 1948. Finally, on November 4, 1948, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar presented the final draft to the Assembly. This final draft was deliberated upon for approximately 32 days, during which 7,635 amendments were proposed, of which 2,443 were discussed in detail. Ultimately, the Constitution of India was divided into 395 articles, 12 schedules, and 22 parts. Currently, this number has grown to 448 articles, 12 schedules, and 25 parts. After 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days of hard work, the day all citizens and members of the Constituent Assembly had eagerly awaited finally arrived. Let's examine when and how our Constitution was adopted and implemented nationwide. Enactment and enforcement of the Indian Constitution. Friends, on November 26, 1949, the Constitution of India was adopted by the country with the signatures of the 284 members present in the Assembly and the President of the Assembly. November 26 is known as Constitution Day in the country. Although it was adopted on November 26, we still celebrate Republic Day on January 26. Why is this so? Friends, except for some provisions such as citizenship, elections, provisional government, etc., the remaining major parts of the Constitution were implemented throughout the country on January 26, 1950, and that is why this day is celebrated as Republic Day. January 26 was specifically chosen because of its historical significance. In 1930, Purna Swaraj Day was celebrated after the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress, and this date was chosen to commemorate this day. The Constituent Assembly held its last meeting on January 24, 1950, and elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first President of India. However, the Assembly was not dissolved and continued to function as the Provisional Parliament of India from January 26, 1950, until the first general elections in 1951. In addition to drafting the Constitution, the Constituent Assembly accomplished several other tasks during its tenure. It adopted the national flag in its present form on July 22, 1947. The national anthem and national song were also adopted on January 24, 1950. The original copy of our Constitution was written in both Hindi and English, although typing or printing was not used at that time. The original copy in both languages was written by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada, who took 6 months to complete the work. Furthermore, each page of the Constitution was illustrated by Acharya Nandalal Bose, and the introduction page was decorated by his disciple, Ram Manohar Sinha. We will undoubtedly be grateful to all these important figures. Their tireless efforts and hard work gave this country its greatest asset, the Constitution. Conclusion. So friends, this was the story of the creation of the Constitution, which is considered the mother of all laws in India. No one in the country has the power to violate it. We'll end today's discussion with a question for you, the audience. Through this story, we told you that 15 women were among the members of the Constituent Assembly. Who were those outstanding women? Please share your answer with us in the comments section.